I'm known for helping highly sensitive, intuitive people. As far as my own background is concerned, just to give you a little bit of information, I'm a true sensitive, highly sensitive person. I have every single health complaint you can possibly think of. I've done the whole death thing a few times. I have actually died. I now have, probably similar to many of you in the room, I have no thyroid function. It's all completely artificial now. I have absolutely no hormone function whatsoever. That has to be completely supported. I have a very serious autoimmune disease, which has to be very closely monitored, because if it gets out of hand, I've probably got about between 4 and 5 years. So how am I healthy? I'm healthy because I utilize and use my high sensitivity correctly. Okay, so I'm not telling you how to suck eggs. I've been there. I know exactly the place that you're in, or that some of you have found yourselves in and are on a long way to getting yourself feeling better. Now, the way that I work within this, I'm very, very passionate about the intuitive sensitive. And what I'm going to show you is some of the ways that you can perhaps recognize that sensitivity and begin to adjust it. And adjust it into something that is great rather than something that you perceive as a burden. So just to define, I've got slides here just to keep me on track, because as I say, I like to babble. Okay. So what is a highly sensitive person? Well, to give you an idea of what the definition of a high sensitive is that some of these things will make sense to you. Others, you think, okay, maybe, but some will resonate very strongly with you. So generally, what a high sensitive is that you have come into this world with a very sensitized nervous system over and above the average person. So throughout your entire life, even from your early years, you felt things in a much stronger way than everybody else. So you were probably told as a child, as an example, oh God, for crying out loud, you're too sensitive, you're oversensitive, you need to calm down on it, it's not an issue. You then start to build through your life this perception of yourself that you're not enough because you're too sensitive. The truth is that it is an actual biological difference. It's not your imagination. Okay? So how does it manifest? Well, as an example, you are much more aware of other people's thoughts and emotions. So you don't actually just notice them, you feel them. You absorb them, and you have to deal with them. And you walk around, you have walked around your entire life thinking, do I want to get involved in that or not? Because you know the consequences. Because you know that what's going to happen is that you are going to go into an environment and find that that person's thoughts, feelings and emotions are going to follow you around probably for the next few days. And it's going to weigh heavily in the solar plexus. So you also are around people where they have a chat with you and they say, oh, I feel so much better, I feel absolutely great, thank you so much for listening, and you're like that. All right. What happened? As a high sensitive, you will also find that you are busy minding your own business, maybe on a bus or a train or something, reading a book, and person next to you sits down and tells you their entire life history. And you think, have I got something stamped on my head? And again, they then finish the conversation by saying to you, do you know what, I've never told anyone that. I can't believe I've told you. And you say, oh, thanks. So you are also naturally intuitive. Okay, so what people may think as a bit spooky is very normal and natural to you, and it's been something with you since your early years. For me personally, I used to get into a lot of trouble for it because I would say things that I thought people had said or had told me, and as a child I used to get into a lot of trouble by saying, oh well, so-and-so is this and this and this and they think this and that. How do you know that? Well, you told me. No, I didn't. Oh, yes you did. No, I didn't. Where'd you get that from? So all of these kind of things you may have had in bucket loads, or you may have had them as light smatterings through your life. You will also perhaps have had very clear, or you still do have very clear indications, as an example, who's on the phone before you pick it up, who you've been thinking about and wondering if they're okay, and then the next minute they're phoning you, or you bump into them in the street. A sharp increase in coincidence, all of that. Now that is because of your heightened awareness and naturally heightened nervous system. Okay? The reason why it exists is because apparently in all animal environments, so all herding animals, okay, have around about 20% of their population as highly sensitive. Okay, more sensitive than the 80%. And the reason for that is it's for the protection of the herd. So the gazelle, as an example, they're all busy munching away. That 20% will be a little bit more nervy than the rest, because they will feel the predator coming before the rest of the herd. So their instincts, the instincts for the rest of the herd, is that when you see them starting to run, you leg it. Now what has happened to us in terms of a society is that we have put to one side our natural intuitive instinct. So you have said, and you've been right in many instances, where something needs to change. We need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. We need to go. And everybody else has said, oh no, shut up, it's all your... And you've thought, over a period of time, over a matter of years, you've thought, oh, well, I'm not important enough. And so, as far as your instinct is concerned, your motion has been to move, and everybody else told you to keep still. And that causes a pressure in your system. Does that make sense? So within that 20%, in terms of you being highly sensitive, you're going to be the highly sensitive, okay? For your systems to have said, hang on a second, we're not doing this anymore, okay? So within that, you will have a very strong drive to help people. So through your life, you have been a giver. And you will have probably been overgiving, to the extent where you have compromised yourself. Okay, does that make sense? So the main issue is, as a high sensitive, is your capacity for empathy. It gets you into trouble, okay, because your empathetic nature means that you feel everything. and you feel for everything. So therefore, that creates a huge pressure within your physical system. Okay, it puts a huge pressure on the nervous system. It puts a huge pressure on not only your nervous system, but on your endocrine system altogether, until the point at which it says, I can't deal with this anymore. Now, I do some work with some medical practitioners, one in particular who has become a very good friend of mine. She is a high sensitive, and we did this survey. I provide services for, I think it's around about 35,000 intuitive sensitives around the world. And we put a survey together, and 2,000 high sensitives filled out this survey. Okay, just to give you an idea of the numbers. In that survey, it was very clear that highly sensitive people have a 30% higher instance of autoimmune related issues over and above the national average. So in actual fact, so Dr. H tells me that autoimmune disease is actually very rare. But amongst high sensitives, it is prolific. Okay, does that make sense, yeah? And out of that survey, it was at least 65% of all the high intuitive sensitives that were surveyed had chronic fatigue. They had experienced it at some point in their life, or they were currently trying to work their way through it. So the big question, from my perspective, obviously what I say is a perspective, it's not the perspective. So why does it happen? The reason it happens is that you've spent your life on high alert. Okay? You don't actually know what it is to calm down. You will be somebody who, for instance, when you go to a restaurant, you will position yourself where you can see the door. You'll never have your back to it. And do you know what? You'll never sit by the loo. And you'll say, if they put you by the loo, they say, right, you'll say, right, I can't sit here. You're going to have to move me. The reason is because you don't want to have to process so many people's energy, because you haven't got the resources anymore. Okay? So you don't actually know what it is to calm down. You know, for instance, what it is to wind your energy up to a very high state, because you're programmed to recognize danger. Now, a lot of high sensitives and a lot of high sensitives with chronic fatigue have come from backgrounds where there has been high drama. So you may have had high drama parents, or you may have had high drama siblings, okay, where there has been a pressure over a prolonged period of time. I'm not saying all sensitives do, but there is a high instance of you coming from an adult-child environment. So the adult-child environment is that you have either come from people who are much less sensitive than you, much less sensitive. So therefore, they have perhaps had a lifestyle which is over and above something that you can cope with. So a lot of high sensitives have come from backgrounds that either are the offspring of people such as alcoholics, or they are second generation. So they are the grandchildren of people who have had a drink issue. Okay, does that make sense? And the reason is because the adult child's energy passes through the generations. Okay, so this is because it's certain ways and means of communication. So your ways and means of communication is likely to be through close contact. And you didn't have it necessarily in your early environment. So therefore, as an adult, you've learned to become what I call a fake non-touch. Okay, so fake non-touch means that you've learned to keep things and everybody at arm's length, okay, in terms of your energy system, when in actual fact, what it needs is close connection. And part of your system's communication with you is to say, we need to develop a relationship. And the relationship isn't with somebody else, it's with yourself. And it may well be because it needs to create enough of a relationship because it hasn't had one very early on in your life. Which is why when you start to, and certainly it's been in my experience, when you start to develop that relationship with yourself actively, you start recovering. And that recovery becomes something permanent. So in my experience, as an example, I am the walking dead. Okay. So I should have a lot more symptoms than I do. My particular things are in a very managed place. And they are in a very managed place because I've learnt how to develop enough of a relationship with myself. I'm not saying it's perfect. So, in you having spent your life on high alert, your sympathetic nervous system is highly aware. Okay, so your sympathetic nervous system is the part that does the fight-flight. Okay, so when I say about the predator, okay, you can recognize predatory energy anywhere. Okay, so shall I give you an example of the predator? Okay, hang on, I have to do it, and I have to think it, hang on. I'm not very good at it, because I'm not a very good predator. Hang on. Right. Okay. This is how the predatory energy works. Okay. Try not to laugh because you're all going, oh! What it does is the predator moves very slowly. Okay, so you've come across predatory people, situations, and your energy goes, whoa. You may have come from backgrounds of the predator. Does that make sense? Does anyone who recognises the predator in their own life? Okay. So, and it will be slow, it's very slow, deliberate movements. So a predator, and the predator is control. Okay, the energy is control. So to give you an example, this is how a predator, let's say in your work environment, okay? So in your work environment, you're busy doing your thing, blah, 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 and high sensitives make themselves really mega busy because it's the way to somehow calm down the nervous system, especially when you're having to process everybody else. So you're charging around like the headless chicken, and then the predator comes in and says, to talk to you. your whole system goes, okay? Because you process all of it. Okay, you process it very hard through your system. So, as an example, in high sensitives, their endocrine system becomes affected very quickly. So, over a prolonged period of time, you may then find, or perhaps you have found, that you've developed allergies. And those allergies have increased over a period of time. Who's got allergies? Okay, very clearly ones. I'm allergic to everything. Literally. I have to carry an EpiPen because I don't know when I will go into anaphylactic shock. And I don't know if any of you have got allergies to that extent. Yeah, it develops over a period of time because I haven't got logical ones. It's not bees. Okay? It can be a strawberry. Or it can be tomatoes. In fact, tomatoes were quite strong for a period of time. That seems to have calmed down. Mold. So if I can smell, I'm really good if someone wants to buy a house and I think if it's got damp in here, I can go and they'll say, but it doesn't smell. So over a period of time, these things build through your system, including to the effect where it has a strong impact on something like your endocrine system. Okay. Part of the reason is your body never knows how to recover. So your parasympathetic never takes the time to properly recover. So to give you an example, when a lion goes out hunting, so it's pounced on a gazelle, one of the ones that didn't take notice that you'd run a long time before. It's pounced on that gazelle, it's had its dinner, what does it do? It then spends the next 4 or 5 hours having a kip, resting, sleeping and recovering. That's the parasympathetic nervous system. Now I should imagine you have no idea how to do that, or you've been learning how to do that. But it's had to become a learnt process. It's not something that you naturally feel comfortable with because you will have been trained to always be busy. Over a period of time, obviously what happens, the body then creates a forced shutdown. Okay, and that shutdown for many people will show as chronic fatigue. And what the body is actually saying is the nervous system can't handle it anymore, it can't process it anymore, it's had enough, the endocrine is starting to be severely disabled. The next line is normally you then start getting blood sugar issues, blood sugar problems, diabetes starts forming. I'm diabetic as well, got that one. Over a period of time, I look at a packet of biscuits and think, oh, I'd love to be able to eat a packet of biscuits. And I'm sure you probably have the same instance. If I ate a packet of biscuits, I wouldn't be able to walk for a week. Whereas everybody else seems to be able to get away with it. And the reason is because your nervous system has become compromised, your endocrine system has become compromised, and therefore your body finds it more and more difficult to process sugar. Who has an issue with sugar? Yeah, most of you will. So this is an observation, and this is something that may be relevant to you, but many sensitives, and certainly many sensitives with chronic fatigue, have, as I said earlier, come from some kind of previous trauma. Okay, and that trauma will have had an impact before the chronic fatigue came in. Obviously, you know, there are post kind of infection type things where people get chronic fatigue, but normally that is for a shorter period of time. Long-term chronic fatigue symptoms, generally what you tend to find is that there has been some kind of previous trauma. Now, usually, definitely for intuitive sensitives, that trauma remains in the body. And the trauma remains in the body for the simple reason that you don't do confrontation. Confrontation to the high sensitive is actually physically painful. It's not that you're avoiding things, it is actually physically painful. It's physically painful in terms of the solar plexus region. So you are not going to actively go around trying to encourage some form of confrontation. So you keep the energy inside. And that energy over a period of time literally goes off, like something rotting at the back of your fridge. So, yes, you could equate it as being that you've got some smelly old bit of lettuce stuck in the solar plexus over a period of time because you're not ever comfortable with confronting some of the things that you should perhaps confront. I can show you quite categorically, as an example, that you will not be comfortable with, because you're high sensitives, you will not be comfortable with being positioned in front of certain people's energy in a certain way. And if your working life, your home life, all of that has required that over a period of time, that will wear down. Okay? That energy will wear down, and you can do something very simple, by being aware of how your energy interacts with somebody as to where you position yourself, so that you don't have to process their energy in terms of their unconscious efforts. How many people do you know wander around and you think, oh, they're lovely, lovely, lovely to everybody, and you think, no, there's some deep anger going on there. Is that my imagination? Never comes out, but you sure as hell can feel it, and you know it's there. So every time you are around that person, as an example, you feel in a rage. And you don't know what to do with it other than it's circulating around in your system. And you think it must be you. Does that make sense? So the stress, so the previous trauma, that stress, it's usually been emotional. Okay, so that emotional stress picks up and it builds up over a prolonged period of time. So in terms of long-term recovery, in terms of looking after your energy system, so that as a high sensitive, you are not heavily impacted by other people, there are certain things that you can do, okay? And one of them is to support the nervous system. And you support the nervous system, it minimizes the stress, okay? One of the very, very simple and basic things is to know where to position your energy, okay? How long have I got? 5 minutes? Right, okay, I better start rapiding. Okay, I was going to show you, but I won't now. So, how do you do it? You do it through an active development of your intuitive nature. That is what I have found to be exceptionally helpful. And that is my speciality, is I show people how to develop their intuitive self so it becomes something that is a very positive part of you, because it was meant to be, okay? You're not meant to be ignored. You're not meant to be ignored by the 80% in terms of your direction forward. Okay? What happens is, over a period of time, is that when you then recover your own sense of self, you move anyway. If they want to come with you, fine. If they don't, it doesn't matter. But the way that you will have been trained is that it does matter if they don't come. So people start to learn over a period of time. So to give you an example, years ago, I said, it's not such an issue right now, but years ago when it was an issue, I said to everyone around me, I said, the floods are coming. And they said, oh, don't be ridiculous. No, you and your paranoid stuff. I said, no, the floods are coming. I don't do floods. I'm moving to high ground. And I said, all my family said, oh, Heidi, that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I said, well, I'm going. See you. That's where I'm going. I don't want my furniture floating. It's not my thing. And I can't do mould. So I moved. I said, and where I'm moving to, I'm going to make sure that it's high ground and it's very far away from water sources. And then I added on there, I said, and there's going to be some big thing on the east coast of America, and it's going to be hit really hard, and there's going to be floods. There'll be floods in Australia. Oh, don't be so ridiculous. You're talking absolute mumbo. All right, fine. When they happened, I get the phone calls. Where are you moving to next? So what I'm saying to you is that in developing your intuitive nature, you get to a point where you can trust your own process and you can feel safe in it, and it doesn't matter if everybody else doesn't think so. Because over a period of time, and after a period of time, they get to see that you were right. And then they start to trigger their own instincts, which is to say, when that one moves, I'm going in the same direction, because generally they're right. But in my experience, every sensitive has gone through the experience of, at some point in their life, of feeling isolated, ignored, and part of them thinking, I want to go home, but I don't know where home is. What I know is that I don't like this environment, I don't like who's on offer, and I want to be home with the people who understand them. Who does that resonate with? So what happens with active development of intuition? It builds your inner emotional confidence. I can't describe it in any other way. I've taught thousands of people over the last 15, 16 years. I've taught the area of intuitive development, psychic development, full-time for 16 years. I get invited to do all kinds of things all over the place. And I've taught thousands of people. And the thing that always comes out is that there's one thing that they can describe in working with their intuitive nature. What has happened in actively participating in and building it is that it has developed their inner emotional confidence. And with that inner emotional confidence has come their psychological and their physical health. Now, the reason for it is that this is a bit of neuroscience, I'll chuck this in, which is it helps the brain to minimize the automatic process of flipping from the brain into the nervous system response. Okay, so the active participation in developing your intuitive nature means participating within your ability to meditate. Okay, and it doesn't mean you've got to sit there going for a couple of hours a day. Meditation is literally focused thought. Okay, so as an example, meditation is proven. There are now over 2,000 studies, neuroscientific studies on the benefits of meditation. Okay, it is a proven system of developing a connection between the prefrontal cortex, so that's the emotional part of the brain. And to give you an example, that we have as high sensitives, we have really bouncy amygdala. Okay, there's two parts of the brain, it's on left and right side. For us, in that high sensitivity, ours is really, really lively and it's very bouncy. Okay, so people with small amygdalas don't have the emotional senses that we have. Okay, but if you to have a brain scan, they would say you got mega bouncy amygdala. Okay, and it lights up like a Christmas tree. When anyone comes into your space, your energy space, it goes ding. What happens is that connection between the prefrontal cortex, so that emotional part of the brain, and the bouncy amygdala, whacks into the limbic system, okay, which is a big mass part of the brain. And as soon as it hits the limbic system, woof, you're into a reaction, not a response. So in developing your intuitive nature, what you're doing is training your system to go into response, not reaction. So you develop the ability to observe rather than absorb, which in my experience, I can tell you in my experience, means a whole lot of difference. So that split-second communication bypasses the nervous system. Okay, so you're then not in a nervous system response where the whole system's gone whoa and becomes overloaded over a period of time where it then has to shut down. You're into response. Okay, and that moment, that split half second of response gives you the ability to choose. And for a lot of high sensitives, they've felt throughout their life they've not been able to choose. They've had something dragged along where they feel they should do rather than want to. It all gets trapped all up in here, in the throat, and then it all gets trapped in the jaw. All of that, all the energy gets trapped in the jaw. I won't go into that because I haven't got time. I'm probably already over time. So that level of communication, what it does is it gives the nervous system recovery time. So in you being able to respond rather than react, it gives your system the ability to recover. And then recover and recover and recover. So for high sensitives, their intuition is their emotional confidence. Okay, that is it. That is your emotional confidence. To be able to deal with any situation, and rather than having to avoid confrontation, that you're able to approach it in a way that's suitable. Because let's face it, we're human, we exist in a world with other humans, and you can get to a place where you don't have to withdraw and retreat, because you're perfect at that, you're brilliant at it. You do people probably for an hour or so at a social function, at a party or something, and then you're found at the end of the garden sitting on the swing. And someone comes to find you, "You all right?" "Yes, I'm fine." And I say, "Are you all right?" "Yes, I'm fine." Go away. What you're having to do is rebuild your system. You're just trying to recover. And then everyone comes like, "You're right, you're right, you're right." Oh. And rather than you think, "Oh, no," it makes you more irritable because the system is still trying to find its peace. Okay? And you're also rubbish at small talk. You can only do talking about the weather for a couple of minutes. But if there is a situation where people are talking about deep subjects and something that's really interesting, you'll be there for hours. Rest of the time, you're off within about 10-15 minutes. So the most important thing that I can say is, and definitely what it has been in my experience, and certainly what I've helped people do over what's quite a long period of time, is in giving them their intuitive nature back, it's given their life back. Thank you very much for your time.